Um, Good afternoon. Hello to everyone tuning in. My name is Herman Rahman. I am the fair manager for art and technology at Digital Art Fair, and I oversee a lot of the curation of the fair. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Today we have a artist sort of talk, fireside chat about AI, modes of making, thinking through data sets. We are joined by Mr. Nick Teeple himself. If you've seen his work, it's such a prominent piece in the sort of curated data sets area and sort of front page of Vogue Hong Kong. How do you feel about that, Mr. Nick?
It feels like amazing validation of all my hard work. Thank you.
Oh, you do like validation. Nick, why don't you just sort of share your background, your practice, how long have you been in Hong Kong, and sort of yeah, just talk a bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back at the Digital Art Fair. My third year working with you on this show, and each year it just gets more and more refined, and really loving the trajectory of Digital Art Fair Asia. Uh, my third year in the show, only my fourth year in Hong Kong. Really nice to be here again, and yeah, I've had a mixed media practice since university. A lot of programming classes, interactive installation classes, and then that kind of turned into VR based 3D animation work for a long time, and then more traditional 3D animation work. And then I started playing around in the AI space around 2017 with the style transfer algorithms. It was so technical in those days. Like you really needed my random work experience as a Linux systems administrator in order to even use this stuff. And I was using like a borrowed GPU from my company that at that time was 5,000 to 6,000 USD for this GPU. So I just happened to be in the right place to play around with that at the time. And luckily, it's gotten much easier to use over the years. So I've just been trying to stay on top of it as it develops because it's still always so rough around the edges and so difficult to tame the beast of the AI art generation software. But yeah, really excited to see how far it's coming along and seeing how I can both use my previous 3D animation work experience to influence what I'm making with AI, as well as the more text to video algorithms, for example, where it's more about being a poet, really, and getting back to some of my poetry practice to see how that ends up looking as a video art.
Nice. I think I sort of followed Nick's work for the last 3 years. As he said, this is his third time at the Charlotte Fair. So there is this progression, and it's sort of really beautiful to see, especially as a curator and as a friend as well. I think one thing that really stood out is I know your history, your family history as glass makers. And I think one thing about glass making and sort of the language of digital art, it's quite intertwined because when people think of digital art, they like to think of this sort of high gloss, high, it's very sharp. The light reflects and refracts, and I think it is very within the canon of the digital art language. So again, I'd like to talk about how sort of the family history in glassmaking maybe has something to do with how you visualize or create your sort of glossy pieces. Yeah, would you like to speak about that?
Yep, I grew up looking at my uncle's glasswork in particular, which were these beautiful Italian style vases and sconces. And yeah, when I first started doing the VR based 3D work, then my brother introduced me to a rendering engine that made it pretty straightforward to do these glass textures on the VR shapes that I was creating. And yeah, I just immediately fell in love with the aesthetic and just couldn't get enough of exploring because you can really zoom in, into these microscopic details that you'd never really be able to explore too much with a physical piece and create these impossible sculptures out of glass. So I've just been uh, working away at that aesthetic ever since, and now I'm really excited to both explore that as it interacts with the AI software, as well as exploring it in physical realm with my sculpture that I made for the show this year, which incorporated a cast glass piece as well.
Yeah. I think was it a natural progression for you to sort of, again, we're talking about modes of production. I think um, when you started, as you said, it was very sort of software driven with renderings and 3D models and stuff like that. So with the sort of rebirth almost of AI, I think there's no denying that with ChatGPT, it's sort of everyone sort of understands AI in a way. Although we have always been participants of sort of artificial intelligence because our phones, the algorithms on our social media and things like that, we have always been participants of AI. It's not a new thing. Um, but with like ChatGPT, with the rise of that, it feels like people are now active participants and they sort of understand now like, oh, like this is, it used to be only one way, now it's like a two-way street interaction kind of thing with AI. So what is that, as an artist yourself, was it normal or natural for you to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna incorporate this to my practice, or were you skeptical at first, or yeah?
Yeah, like I said, I've been trying to like basically just stay on top of it as it progresses and just take it one, GitHub repo at a time, basically, and see how it works and how I can play with it and have an interaction with it that produces something that's beautiful and pleasant to look at and matches my aesthetic in some way. And so, yeah, I think it's becoming more and more like a collaborator and less like a Photoshop filter, basically,
Yeah.
where it started out as. And yeah, just really excited to, because like I referenced before, with the prompting that you have to do for the AI algorithms, it really brings out my English/poetry skills more and gets me thinking in those terms as well, which is very refreshing because otherwise it's just all mouse and keyboard and then trying to make these lines and curves and things like this. So it's nice to get the language aspect to come back into the practice in that way.
So speak a bit more about prompting. I think the term prompting is a very hot topic now, and as you said, so sort of set up the scene for us. You're in a software, and it requires you to put in words, right? So, for example, if on Midjourney or any of these sort of softwares, you could say Hong Kong, 2050, blue skies, two buildings on fire, and a floating dim sum, and then that will generate an image accordingly to that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good overview, especially of the more popular like Mid-Journey platforms where people are making, uh, especially the static images, right, that they're generating, trying to get that kind of very specific results. Uh, because I'm much more interested in abstract art than something purely obvious narrative. I'm doing a lot more kind of more abstract words basically and just seeing what comes out of the algorithms and not trying to go for something so literal. So that's more interesting for me in my practice to see how I can play with the inputs and outputs and see what kind of wild things come out of it.
I think an important thing that you touched on is to stay on top of it, because it's a thing where it's the systems now are so complex, and with the prompts that I said, you can even put like a style on it. So you can say, oh, I want it in like a Wes Anderson style, and then it will sort of understand what the Wes Anderson style means and produce the image accordingly. And I think for me, that as a curator, that's exciting. But as an artist, is it scary? Because I always like to think of it as, human labor. What's the human labor involved in the art making process? How much is it the machine and how much is it the human? So, people, we are having these conversations because we are at a time where we have seen a lot of this information with the use of AI generated images. You could say, with the war that's going on, with a lot of these, we have already had the war of disinformation for the longest of time. And this in the negative aspects of AI, and we should discuss it because it's not all flowers and daisies, and there are big implications, Um, where do you see all this going, or like, where is there, would you think, a cap, or like, or is it just about humans just questioning everything?
Uh, Skepticism will never be more important as it is going to be in the next decade. That's for sure. Uh, I'm trying to stay focused on the artistic applications, obviously, in my personal practice. I'm a bit terrified about the political misinformation campaigns and this kind of thing, of course. But I try to stay equally on top of the amazing good news coming out of the AI space as well, like AlphaFold, generating all the different protein pairs that are possible that would have taken scientists, decades to figure out, and this kind of thing. So, uh, yeah, we will have to be very careful about the bad, scammy uses of AI, just like we can't click on any links anymore that we get sent from any email or text message ever again, basically. So it's going to require a lot more consumer education, this kind of thing as well.
I think it was Hans Ulrich Oberst who said, um, oh no, I think it was Marshall McCollin from the Medium. It's a Message, and he said art serves as an alarm system, and he said that back in the '60s and '70s, and we're at this stage now where a lot of creators are using AI as a tool, and it almost serves as an alarm system for the larger world. I would say using AI, or isn't a new thing in the art world. Obviously, you have like Vera Molnar from the '80s, '90s, and her work sort of coming back in fashion because generative art is such a hot topic. The bigger auction houses, museums, like, oh, I want to see who did it first, and sort of they go back. So it's not a new thing, generative art or using AI as a tool for help. I was interested to see what's your stance again on back to that human versus machine thing. Um, how much of it is your input, and how much of it is like, are you building your own data sets, or are you sort of using pre-existing data sets? Like, how much of it, how much tweaks do you have?
Yeah, I think the stable diffusion base model has been quite a gift to the artistic community, and so it's allowed so much flexibility without needing to learn how to do like a pure model by yourself, which obviously requires so much computer science knowledge. So I most of my work these days is building on the stable diffusion model, but then yeah, even just recently, there's been some really cool developments with how to basically instant train a process where you inject your references images into it without needing to go through the process of actually training the model yourself. So I've been exploring that as well to just try to speed things up a bit because it can just eat away at your weekends to dig into the technical side of these things.
Would you like to speak more about the work that you have in the space? Why the use of the brain was one thing that
Yeah,
yeah.
sure. Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm trying to stay on top of all the AI news in the world. Obviously, it's some of the most important things on the headlines these days. And yeah, I couldn't help but keep thinking about the headlines I saw about the study they did where they trained a model on someone's MRI data while they were watching a movie, and the model knows what movie they're watching. So the model knows the plot line, and the model is associating the MRI images with the plot line that it already understands. And then they show that person a new movie that the model has not been trained on, and the model was able to understand the plot of the movie based on the MRI data. So it's like the earliest stages of reading someone's mind, right? They're able to reconstruct what someone's looking at just on the MRI data. So this is a very important thing that people need to understand is coming down the pipeline. Obviously, it's not going to require an MRI in 10, 15 years. It's going to require like a little thing on your glasses or something. So I'm just trying to one, like, call attention to this development in the technology, and also from an artistic angle, right? Like, maybe I hope to inspire people to think about how they will approach that in a more optimistic way, right? Because it's easy to jump to the terrified, privacy-focused conclusion with that technology, but what if we choose to take this opportunity to work on our minds a little bit more, so we have a bit more control over our thoughts, encourage a bit more meditation, that we're always trying to get better at, and yeah, take that approach instead. So I wanted to make my piece about that, and so I've got the brain motif in the bust with the glass face over top of it, so it's a bit obscured. You're kind of like uh, looking through an obstruction of the glass surface to see the brain, just like the AI can't really see our thoughts so clearly yet. So these are the kind of things that I was playing with.
Nice. I think no one has ever said MRI so that many times. Besides my mom is an actual MRI technician.
Oh
So
yeah.
after my mom, you're the person that says MRI the most. So I really appreciate that work. I think it's even I've not heard that story before. I've not heard the rationale of the piece before, but that is fascinating. But it's also almost scary. Like I like to think. Um, I mean, working at Digital Art Fair, I'm obviously consumed by digitalness, and I think it's another talk entirely to define digitalness in sort of its fullest sense. But if every sort of development in the tech world, it almost feels scary, but it almost feels promising. Like I think we have spoken a lot with Bianca, whose work is on the Kowloon walled city, and I just want to focus on the sort of that aspect of using AI to generate these images of places that don't exist almost. Like, so if the crowd has seen the work at the Datasets exhibition, on the right wall there's a work by Bianca. Bianca is a Hong Kong-based artist, and her project is about the Kowloon walled city. And I think every Hong Konger or everyone who lives in Hong Kong has this very fond, not fond, but like, they know what the walled city is about. It's termed the city of darkness, and but there are no images that come out of it. There's probably like a very small percentage of images come out of that place. So what Bianca has done is sort of put the existing images that I found, and she worked with Greg Gerard, the photographer, who has taken images of the Kai Tak airport, and like was a very prominent photographer in the 80s and 90s. And what she's done is that she formed a data set of these images, and then prompted I think she used Midjourney or something, yeah, to produce these images. And I think that's a very exciting use of AI, because it's how do you visualize a place that cannot be visualized, or like is purposely built to a point of no visualization. My sort of dissertation or writing back in my university was about North Korea, and I was really fascinated with the idea about scopic regimes. Scopic regime, in a sense, is where you sort of build the parameters of what can be seen or can't be seen. So in ideas of censorship, privacy, things like that. But more specifically, in my case, I was looking to North Korea, because if you think of images as a balloon, and you take a photo, you upload it somewhere, this balloon is just traveling all around the world almost, and you're someone in South Africa, a friend of mine, Dan, he could look at his phone and be like, oh, Herman's in Hong Kong, this image sort of floats around. So back then I was thinking of where does this sort of network of balloons just pop and stop, and it's North Korea, So for Bianca to use images to imagine a scopic regime or a counter to that scopic regime was really fascinating. And I think one thing that really stood out for me was that work was not painting the walled city as bleak, right? It was painting it almost as full of hope. There's kids on the roof with the planes flying over, and you kind of forget there was 33,000 people who lived in that small space, which meant there was 33,000 different stories to be told. So for me, my question to you is, I know your work isn't really necessarily narrative based, but do you see this potential now to use AI for more narrative based works for your own practice? Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I'll see how it develops in my practice. I will say that I'm terribly excited about the narrative practice of proper filmmakers that I follow that are actually exploring using pure AI and making short films purely with the prompt generated videos, because it's very difficult to make long segments right now. So they're doing these really clever things with the really short segments that they pin together. And so, I won't call myself a filmmaker, so I think that
Not
is
yet.
not yet. Yeah, that's way down the horizon for me. And I'm more interested in maybe some of the 3D aspects as well. But I think that uh, work like Bianca's and the filmmakers that I follow is super inspiring to see how they're pushing the narrative uh, possibilities of the AI algorithms and recreating or creating from scratch those spaces that we would normally not have access to, like you're referring to. I think it's really exciting.
A really sort of funny thing that's come out over the past couple of months is detecting AI images. It's like, how can you tell something's AI? And what's really funny, it might have, it's obviously daily, by the second, by the minute, getting better and better. But one thing that AI generated images can't really do well is hands, right? It's like you see sometimes they're 4 fingers, 6 fingers, 7 fingers. It's just never like a thing. But what I do like about it is the imperfection of it. But when you're making the work, do you sort of bask in the glory of imperfection, or are you trying to have it like perfect and crisp, or like, do you
Yeah, it's a
find joy in the
constant
imperfect?
struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
So you are trying to perfect it almost.
Well, I'm a perfectionist at heart, and of course, like my 3D work is like super refined looking for the most part, unless it's like the chaotic ones. But yeah, especially the glass stuff, I want it to look super super crisp. So it's a struggle, but it's a fun struggle. Like I enjoy, and as a perfectionist, then it's nice to try to find those opportunities to let go of it a little bit and play with the chaos. And so I enjoy the struggle, but yeah, like sometimes it's terribly frustrating when you do want something to look right and the AI just refuses to do the thing you're trying to do, like make a hand without 6 fingers or something like that. Yeah.
Um, I would like to open questions to the floor. If anyone has any questions about AI or art making or AI in general. Roy, do you have any questions? I know you use ChatGPT every single day in the office. You've not had a single thought of yourself. Any questions?
Do you think that AI generative art is more constrained by the artist's imagination at the moment or by the technology?
That's a good question. Mm, I know, especially for example, when I talk to ChatGPT, then I will ask it questions and it'll give me like a concise little response, but then it just reveals to me all the things that I'm not asking it. And it's similar with the artwork software, I think. Like because it's so powerful, the sheer robustness of it about what it could generate weighs on me a little bit. Like how it makes me feel a bit like self-conscious of how uh, not poetic I'm actually being, right? I'm just like typing a few prompts in there, but I feel like if I worked much harder on it, that I could produce much better images because I know the potential's there. So personally, I feel like there's obvious technical limitations right now with the software and with the technology, but I feel personally that there's a lot of limitations on my own use of it as well. Yeah, so it's a good question and a good conversation that I have with myself and with others. Yeah, thanks.
Does it take working with a machine to know the limitations of your humanness? Is that what it is?
No, I know the limitations all the time.
Right.
I did want to say one thing as
Yeah.
well, though, because I thought it was a really nice reference to the artist as the alarm bell, right, for the technology. And I just wanted to say that this talk made me think about that and realize that along with being an alarm bell, which I think is incredibly important, social role, there's also the role of being the optimist, right? So that you see the alarming technology, but hopefully show at least one example of how to follow that path without freaking out, and by doing something really nice and beautiful and hopefully inspiring along the way. while sounding the alarm at the same time?
I think at the end of the day, it is material. Like it's just another tool for people to create with. But I think that sort of understanding of where it came from and where it's gonna go, that's the important part. And I think artists or just sort of general people in society should have a basic understanding of these tools because I think the word algorithms wasn't a big word 5 years ago. People just sort of were like, oh, this is my news feed. But now like algorithms is such a word. Like people don't really understand it like, bar for bar, word for word, but people have a general understanding of it. And I think that's the important thing with these sort of new technologies is to just have a basic understanding of this is what can be potentially done, this is where it came from, and the future almost seems quite limitless with these technologies that are coming to us. So, Nick, congratulations again on a
Thank
really
you.
fantastic showing. And yeah, that's been a quick fireside chat about AI.
Thank you, Herman.
If there's any other questions, we'll be around in the booth. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.